For nearly 2 years now, I've been developing a game inspired by the best parts of Minecraft, Stardew Valley, and even Skyrim. In this game, you have to build a settlement by inviting new villagers, each with their own quests, items, and abilities. This month's build began with me fixing some issues with the terrain generator. The problem was that it never really generated a navigable or consistent world, but sure, it looked cool, but it wasn't really any good for gameplay. The problem I found was to do with how I mask off the island. So theoretically, it should have generated a circular mask based upon these animation curves, where the center of the curve is the center of the island and the edges of the curve are the edges of the island. That way, in the middle, I can accentuate the mountain. You'd think that this then would make the island look like a circle, but it always seemed to look something along the lines of a cross, which led to some really strange landscapes. For context, I generate my terrain using a height map, which can be represented as an image like the one here. This one is of the British Isles. In a height map, white means high and black means low, so you can see up in Scotland here, in the Highlands, it's all white. But if you go further down into the East Midlands of England, you can see it's a lot greyer and flatter, and that means that it's much lower and closer to sea level. My height map consists of 3 separate other height maps. The first is a ridged height map used to create the mountains in the middle of the world. The second is a billowing height map used to create some lovely rolling hills, and the third is just some standard simplex noise used to add some extra detail. And then combining these 3 height maps together, we get my final world height map. I managed to fix the weird cross shape by masking off each of these height maps slightly differently. And here are a few different terrains generated from different seeds. You can see that it's now very consistent in the general shape, but still has a lot of charm and variation that comes with procedural generation. And the mountain in the centre of the island is incredibly important to Sundermead's story, so I had to make sure that was extra consistent to allow things to spawn up there. In the last build, I added a new character called Rowena. She can be invited to Sundermead to work as the settlement's tailor. I didn't mention her in the last video because I hadn't actually finished her questline, but I did that this time around. Her quests are, of course, tailor related, like this one, where she's running low on resources and so has asked you to explore an old Roman temple high up on the mountain. When you get there, you'll find a troll who has made himself at home in the ruins. The look for this troll was inspired by the Trolk from Hytale, which is actually inspired by a combination of trolls and orcs from high fantasy, so that kind of works out. I began by modelling it in Blockbench, but I realised that the rig I used for animating my characters wouldn't work with that, so I had to start again from scratch. This is what I ended up with, and I'm pretty happy with it. In case you couldn't tell, I generally try and go for a more pixel art style for the characters, but a more realistic but still stylized art style for the environments. I'd like to say that I started doing this purely for artistic reasons, but that would be a lie. I'm just really bad at art. This troll acts as Sundermead's second boss. I've already made a video about the first one, so why not go and watch that after this video. He has a few different attacks and will be quite a challenge to beat, but I won't go too far into it because I'd like to keep something to surprise for when the game comes out. Rowena's final quest is about designing a banner for your settlement, and so I had to create a little designer for that. Here's a few examples of ones I've made, and the idea is that it allows players to add that extra bit of customization and personalization to their settlement. The next thing I decided to do was model an armour set based upon what would have been worn by infantrymen during the later stages of the Western Roman Empire. This set is made up of a helmet and a tunic with scale armour atop it. Here's what the real helmet looks like, and here's my version. And here's the real tunic. And here's what it looks like being worn by the player, with the gladius to really sell that Roman feel. If you're a history nerd like me, one interesting thing I think about this helmet is that you can clearly see how it's Roman, but you can also see that it's quite similar to a lot of Germanic helmets that have been found, such as the Sutton Hoo helmet that was found in Suffolk in the 1930s. This is because the Germanic tribes began to copy a lot of Roman ideas at this time, especially when it came to armour. I also fixed quite a major performance bug this time around. The bug was that the longer you played the game, the slower the terrain generator would become, eventually to the point where walking around the world caused constant freezes. I eventually tracked this down to a memory leak caused by the algorithm that I used to update the chunks in my quad tree. Basically, I have a pooling system where any old chunks that aren't in use get chucked in that pool, and when the new chunks get generated, it tries to grab any not in use from that list. The problem was that it wasn't doing that, and so every time the chunks got updated, it spawned new ones, even when it shouldn't. This meant that the memory usage of my game would just grow up and up and up to the point where it would eventually crash. Luckily, this is fixed now and these spikes have completely gone away and the memory usage stays nice and consistent. Now, speaking of good performance, I'd like my game to perform well on release, so if you like the look of Sundermead, I have an active Steam page where you can go and wishlist it and share it with your friends. I also have a Discord where I share smaller updates about the game, so why not join that too? After fixing that memory leak, I was finished with everything that I had planned for this version, but I'd been playing Red Dead Redemption 2 recently and noticed that puddles would form in the ground whenever it's raining. I thought it looked really nice, and so I decided to try and mimic it in Sundermead. The process for doing this was pretty simple because I already had a function set up for displaying snow on the terrain based upon the surface's normal. I could just reuse this function and apply different parameters for the colour, smoothness and normal. And here's the result. I'm really happy with it. The effect will automatically fade in and out based upon the weather, and I plan on adding a wetness effect to other entities in the future, but that'll have to wait for another version. And I reckon that's about it for this video, so I hope you found it vaguely entertaining. Like I said before, I have a Steam page and a Discord server where you can keep more up to date with the game. And thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.